The Knicks could be getting some good news soon as Precious Achiuwa was upgraded to questionable for tomorrow's game against the Hornets. How do you see Tibbs infusing Precious here in this rotation? Hasn't made his debut yet, but maybe it's tomorrow.
Yeah, I imagine the first few games he'll be limited in the amount of minutes he can play, but I think it would be very hard, and I don't want to say unfair, but I think it'd be hard to leave Jericho out of the rotation. I think Tibbs will go 9. I think we saw a little bit of that in the preseason with Jericho and Precious playing together, but Jericho has deserved to be in the rotation. Like everything that you hear coaches preach, developing, knowing where to be, knowing what to do, impacting winning without the basketball. Like Jericho has done that. He's obviously everybody's talked about the amount of or the low field goal percentage opponents have against him at the rim, but I even see him in pick and roll and looks like he's just doing a better job of knowing where to be and standing down and not jumping on as much stuff. I think it would be hard to leave Jericho out of the rotation. So I think when Precious comes back, they go to 9. You'll see probably Cam, Deuce, Precious, Jericho, and then one of Mikal or OG or Mikal and Josh in stretches, and he'll figure it out from there. But yeah, I think they're going to be happy to get Precious back. I thought he was, if not the best, maybe the second best player during preseason for them.
Yeah.
Had some very good performances on the glass, shooting the ball, defense. Obviously, it's going to take him some time. Like hamstrings are no joke.
Yeah.
That can just be a lingering thing. Same with Deuce's knee. That's going to be something he deals with all year. But I'm sure they're happy to have him back to have some size and maybe even be able to get to experiment with playing Cat alongside another big too.
And that's what I've been wondering, because as well as Jericho has been playing, we still haven't seen him and Cat out there together, right? And especially when this Knicks defense gets in trouble, we still haven't seen it. So that's what I'm wondering with Tibbs is when Precious comes back, do we see that? And ultimately, if and when Mitchell Robinson comes back, how do they go forward with those two guys? And will we see more two big looks?
I think so. I actually asked Tibbs about this the other day. If the reason, I was like, you've been experimenting. He's experimented with the rotation. He's experimented with different coverages and stuff. But we would think if we're thinking about Tibbs experimenting, like the media and the fans, the first thing we would think of was he'd probably try two bigs first. And as you mentioned, he hasn't even tried that really yet. And part of me thinks he's keeping something in his back pocket, the ability to throw out a new wrinkle as the season goes on and something to work toward the second half of the season as they get ready for the playoffs. Not wanting to show your hand right away, right? And the fact that they have injuries helps that. You don't want to play Jericho and Cat together for long stretches, and those are two guys historically who have had foul trouble issues. So I think getting one of Precious and or Mitch back, obviously Precious coming sooner, will allow them to experiment with that a little bit more. He had mentioned that they had started to work on it in practice, which they had not really practiced a ton over the start of the season. But then Cat got nicked up and they weren't really able to get into it. That's at least what he told us, right? So I don't know this. I would imagine that's something that they're going to look at eventually. And if I were him, I understand maybe putting that in your back pocket for when you really need it, or where you feel like your team is maybe not mastered, but you feel good about where your team is with Cat at the 5, and you want to try to see if there's a different style you guys can play too.
Yeah. Well, one thing for sure is that I think optionality is always going to be a good thing, especially in this league with so many skilled players and schemes and things of that nature. Giving teams different looks, I think, will be ideal for this Knicks unit. But I think what will be interesting in April and beyond is, I had former Knick Derek Harper on the show last week, and he talked about, when we talk about the state of the game, and he's like, he always prefers to play to your strengths.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, for this Knicks team, what will that be? Obviously, offense, we know that, but defensively,
still figuring that out.
Can they still, they're still figuring that out. What do they do in terms of matching up with the Cavs? What do they do in terms of matching up with Boston? I think that's going to be fascinating to see as they traverse the season.
And does trying to cover up their weaknesses defensively take away from their offense, right?
Right.
Maybe playing two bigs improves the defense, but takes the offense down a notch and a half. So I'm fascinated. That's probably going to be the most watched storyline for the next few weeks as Precious gets back, to see if we see that a little bit more and to see how it looks. But it's something worth monitoring for sure. I think that's a great point.